The Crooked Forest: Myths, Legends, and Unanswered Questions. Nestled deep in the lush forests of western Poland, not far from the town of Gryfino, lies one of nature's most puzzling mysteries. Known as the Crooked Forest, this grove of strangely shaped pine trees has intrigued locals and visitors for decades. Estimated to be around 90 years old, the 400 or so curved trees that make up the Crooked Forest still have experts scratching their heads about how and why they grew the way they did. While several plausible theories have been proposed over the years, no single explanation has managed to solve the riddle behind the Crooked Forest's unusual shape. As such, the pine grove has spawned legends, supernatural tales, and unanswered questions that continue to draw people into its puzzling maze of twisted trunks and branches. The mystery unfolds. The Crooked Forest first garnered widespread attention after World War II, when the area was being administered by Poland after the victorious Allied powers redrew the country's borders. Local foresters working on cleanup and restoration projects came across the unusual grove deep in the woods and were perplexed by what they found. A vast expanse of pine trees, with strangely twisted trunks and bent branches, extended in neat rows through the forest. While curved and oddly shaped trees are not unheard of in nature, what made the Crooked Forest so peculiar was the uniformity of the tree's shape and the fact they were growing in aligned rows. The grove stretched over an area of around 8 hectares 20 acres, and the majority of pine trees had a pronounced 90-degree bend in their trunk a few feet up from the ground before shooting straight upwards. The bends were so severe that some trunks formed nearly perfect semicircles, before jutting skyward like the masts of old wooden sailing ships. Aside from the bizarre curves near their bases, the pines appeared perfectly normal and healthy, without any disease or external signs of damage that could explain the unusual growth. The foresters who first surveyed the Crooked Forest were at a complete loss to explain what they had found. The grove's remote location deep in the woods meant there were no obvious signs of human intervention, like old farming equipment or fence posts, that could have guided the pine's growth. And the symmetrical, uniform shape of so many trees with the same bent trunks suggested something more mysterious and deliberate than random chance or illness. As news of the puzzling pine grove spread, experts, journalists, and curious locals began flocking to the site in the hopes of uncovering clues about its origins and debating theories on what prompted the mysterious right-angle curves. So what events in history could have led to the creation of the enigmatic Crooked Forest? Numerous hypotheses have been suggested over the decades, but most can be grouped into 3 broad categories: human intervention, environmental factors, and supernatural causes. Let's explore these major theories and assess if any can adequately unravel the secrets behind the pine tree's bizarre shape. Theories and explanations. Human intervention. The most common initial theory about the Crooked Forest's unusual form involves deliberate human intervention at some point in the tree's early growth period. There are a few variations of this idea that have been proposed: wood processing practices. One idea suggests local foresters may have intentionally manipulated the young trees as part of wood cultivation and processing practices to create bent timber for use in building furniture or the hulls, decks, and masts of ships. They could have accomplished this by tying down young saplings when they reached a certain height, forcing them to grow at severe right angles before releasing them. However, critics of this theory argue that creating batches of bent timbers would require substantial manual labor for little added benefit, and there is no historical evidence of tree shaping like this happening. Additionally, if the goal was processing lumber, most trees would have likely been chopped down before growing to the substantially larger mature specimens we see today in the Crooked Forest. Protecting transportation routes. Another human intervention theory involves the idea that the trees were purposefully manipulated to mark paths and protect important transportation routes in the area. Historical documents indicate a railroad line was built through this region of western Poland around 1930, when the pines would have been saplings. Perhaps the trees were bent to designate safe passage space for trains, or possibly mark distance intervals along the tracks. But this fails to explain why the trees were left to grow for decades after, rather than being cut or trimmed once the rail line was completed. Whimsical creation. Some speculate the crooked forest may have simply been a fanciful, whimsical creation by an eccentric local, with time, resources, and horticultural skills to intentionally grow pine trees in unusual twisted shapes for their own amusement. But the scope and scale of creating 400,500 uniformly bent trees seems far beyond an individual's casual hobby. And why go through years of effort with no intention to maintain, showcase, or take credit for such a fantastical display? While human creativity and ingenuity have produced some staggeringly complex creations and land formations over centuries, none of the common deliberate intervention theories seem to fully add up as likely explanations for the crooked forest's origins. With no definitive historical records, visible remnants, or obvious purpose behind expending so much time and effort, the reasons behind manually manipulating so many pine trees in this way remain shrouded in mystery. Environmental factors. If human design doesn't appear a plausible rationale, could unusual environmental factors or a freak natural event have contributed to the crooked forest's distinctive shape? There are several possibilities along these lines that have been suggested. Extreme snow. One proposed natural cause involves heavy snowfall during the pine's early development stage. The theory suggests an unusually harsh winter dumped deep snow on newly sprouted pine seedlings, forcing them to grow laterally until spring warmth melted away the snow burden and allowed them to resume growing upright. However, for this to uniformly affect hundreds of trees to create the patterns seen today seems incredibly unlikely. And the region does not tend to receive the type of extreme, long-lasting snowpacks each winter necessary for such an explanation. Flood damage. Some wonder if rushing flood waters or a breached river dam in the 1930s bent vulnerable young pines before eventually subsiding to let them reorient skyward. But there are no historical records of significant flooding that could have achieved effects on such a localized, uniform scale. And flood damage would be expected to leave more random patterns rather than rows of evenly spaced and repeated right angles, seen throughout the crooked forest. Gravitational anomaly. A more far-fetched idea involves mysterious gravitational or magnetic waves, causing fluid pressure in the tree's cell structure that prompted them to bend and twist as they grew. However, there is no known scientific basis for spontaneous mass gravitational fluctuations like this, particularly with enough precision to target specific species in certain forest areas. And the lack of other documented growth oddities nearby makes this an unlikely culprit. While environmental and natural causes for the crooked forest shape can't be ruled out entirely, none of the common theories seem probable based on historical climate data and our current understanding of biology and physics. The available evidence fails to indicate any extreme weather, flooding, or gravitational events focus solely on this one section of forest that can adequately account for the pine grove's puzzling form. So with human design and natural phenomena both coming up short on explanations, could something more supernatural or paranormal be at play? Supernatural explanations. With rational theories failing to unravel the crooked forest mystery, perhaps we should consider irrational possibilities rooted in mythology, folklore, and the supernatural. Unexplained phenomena often breed legends and mythical tales, and the peculiar pine grove has spawned its fair share over generations. While definitively proving paranormal activity is virtually impossible, the lack of viable alternatives at least makes the option worth contemplating. Some of the more prominent otherworldly explanations for the crooked forest's origins include a landing zone. Befitting a popular paranormal trope, one out there idea is that the tree's unusual shape resulted from exposure to an alien spacecraft landing or hovering in the area sometime around 1930, when the trees were just sprouting. The theory speculates gravitational propulsion systems or engine radiation from the UFO could have mutated the pine's growth pattern into the uniform 90-degree bends witnessed today. Beyond the general implausibility of prolific alien visitations to rural Poland a century ago, there is no corroborating evidence of UFO sightings or close encounters linked to the crooked forest that could support such a radical explanation. But for some true believers in extraterrestrial interference on Earth, this remains an enticing theory. Pagan hex. More grounded in regional history is the idea that the twisted pines are the product of a hex, or curse by pagan groups still active in parts of rural Poland. When the trees sprouted around 1930, Certain pagan rituals are said to invoke powerful forces of nature for transfiguration or punishment. Perhaps the Crooked Forest is the result of a pagan clan exacting magical revenge on enemies, or attempting to mark the land for gathering areas through druidic incantations that altered the pine tree's development. While tempting fodder for supernatural speculation, documentation of curses producing changes on this scale and duration are scarce. But pagan groups have played a meaningful role. Poland's cultural tapestry. Over centuries and deep local superstitions still ascribe strange natural phenomena to their occult interference. Whatever the source, be it aliens, witches, or mythical forest guardians, the lack of sound scientific explanations has left the door open for imagined paranormal forces generating the Crooked Forest's unusual shape. And these supernatural tales only add to the curious allure that continues, drawing people down the grove's twisted paths. Nearly a century later, secrets of the Crooked Forest endure. Nearly 100 years since first bursting from the soil, the puzzle behind the Crooked Forest's mystifying shape endures, and visitors to the surreal grove keep seeking answers. While assorted theories have tried rationalizing the pine tree's curves through human intervention, environmental factors or supernatural causes, no definitive explanation has unlocked the Crooked Forest's secrets. With much of the grove's history closely tied to tumultuous regional events surrounding World Wars I and II, first-hand accounts or documentation of the pine's origins are scarce. And as those who may have witnessed the Crooked Forest sprouting, as saplings in the early 20th century fade from living memory, the trail towards solving the mystery only grows murkier. For now, the peculiar pine grove remains a beguiling freak of nature, resistant to all efforts solving its riddle. As such, the Crooked Forest continues fueling myths, legends, and imaginative folklore passed between generations. Locals speak of wandering ghosts leaving twisting trails through the woods, and witches testing new potions that alter the laws of physics. Visitors explore theories involving gravity-defying forces or residual ripples through time-bending matter in unnatural ways. Such fantastical speculation endows the Crooked Forest with ever greater intrigue for those fascinated by mysteries and bound to reality. Much as its pine boughs jut in divergent directions, opinions on the Crooked Forest's unconventional contours split to myriad interpretations. But perhaps speculating about gravitational waves and pagan hexes misses the true magic the Crooked Forest offers visitors. By stubbornly refusing to conform to expectations or yield its secrets, the pine grove serves as a resplendent reminder that mysteries still inhabit pockets of the natural world. And if you listen closely, the Crooked Forest whispers that some puzzles are better left unsolved, so human imaginations, journeying through its twisted boughs, can discover new legends sprouting with each winding step along the way.